Well, as the hours tick away, we can speak to the former England defender Gary Neville, who joins us live now. Welcome along on match day, Gary. It's a very special feeling, one that you yourself have experienced. But before we get into England, let's start off, if we may, with a mention of Christian Eriksen, because the Danish FA has just given us an update on his condition. He remains stable and still in hospital for further tests. Gary, how do you feel the situation was handled by all concerned?
I think it was handled, obviously, very well. The obviously reaction of the medical teams and the players in the immediate vicinity and referees was as you would expect it to be. Obviously, when you're a player on the pitch, I've never been on the pitch when something like that has happened, so you can imagine that it would be complete shock. So to react in the way in which they all did is a great testament to them, and obviously it's incredibly positive news that you've just shared with me now that Christian Eriksen is stable and having tests in hospital.
Now, it is, of course, match day at a major tournament. It is England's opening game and they're playing at Wembley. Very, very few people, generations apart, in fact, know what that feels like. But you are one of those people. What is the first thing on your mind as you wake up on the morning of England match day at a major tournament at home?
It was my first tournament, so for me, I was, you can imagine, incredibly nervous. The anticipation in the nation was just incredible, Euro 96. And actually, there were some similarities to today, the heat that the players are going to experience today, the afternoon kickoff. And they're two things that usually English football teams don't ordinarily like in terms of obviously playing in such heat. So there are some similarities. But this team, I think, has got great technical ability. They've got good confidence coming out of the World Cup 3 years ago in Moscow. And I anticipate they'll do well today. I don't think a draw is the worst result in the world, and that's not being negative. But I think with the lead into the tournament, with the players obviously not having too much time to have played together and the heat and playing against a good team, I do think it's a difficult encounter. So, people shouldn't be too disappointed if England don't win today, but I think it's important that they at least get a draw.
Yeah, I mean, in contrast to the 2018 World Cup, where England started off against Tunisia, a game that they won, they were expected to win. This is a tougher opener, isn't it? And so many talking points in terms of team selection, Gary, all over the 11, really. But in terms of attacking players, we broke this in the last hour. We expect Phil Foden and Raheem Sterling to start amongst the forwards alongside Harry Kane. Is that the right call for you?
I think you're always going to be in a situation where Mount, I think, is going to play unless something happens with his form or injury. And then you're talking about probably starting Foden or Grealish, and then one of the quicker ones, which is Rashford, Sancho or Sterling. So for me, it isn't a surprise that balance. I think with Harry Kane up front, who's obviously an absolute no-brainer to start, you do need one of those wider forwards to make sure that they run past him. I think if everybody's coming naturally to the ball, then it becomes a little bit more difficult for Harry. So I think that for me, the balance feels about right, but it does mean that with the fact that the game is going to be played in such heat, we're going to see, if you're right with what you just told me there and Sterling and Foden start, then Grealish and Rashford can come on at any point, and they're great options to have for Gareth to change the game if it's needed.
I mean, I was going to say, as options off the bench, I mean, that is almost an embarrassment of riches, Rashford and Grealish. Do you think they'll be there counting themselves a little unlucky, though, Gary?
Not as much as they would have done 15, 20 years ago. I think players now a little bit, look, they'll be disappointed. It's the first game in the tournament, but I think players now are more conditioned to feeling as though it's a squad game. I don't think there's a lack of selfishness, I think, in groups now. With the big squads of 24, 25 players, they've played all season in a COVID environment with games every 3 days where they've been rotated constantly. They used to being rotated. It isn't like it was 15 or 20 years ago. So whilst there's an element of disappointment, Marcus Rashford and Jack Grealish will recognise that they'll play not just a part in probably this game today, but certainly a part in the next few weeks. A tournament, you sort of think sometimes that you have to basically always play the first game, but it's a long old time, a month. And if you're looking to get to the end, which England are, then all those players are there, that are there, or most of them, are going to play a part in it at some point.
And when it was at Euro 96, I mean, the whole team pretty much named itself, the first 11, and the defence certainly named itself. Neville, Southgate, Adams, Pearce. But this time around, there's conversations over whether it's a 3 or a 4 in terms of the back line. We expect it to be a flat back 4, but who plays alongside John Stones for you?
always thought that if Harry Maguire wasn't fit, that it would be a back five. I just didn't see a natural partner for John Stones that would be good enough in a back four to be able to keep England solid. I still feel that they could go with a five, but if they are going to go with a four, I suspect it's going to be Cody, I think, even though Mings, to be fair, has the natural left foot. But that's how I feel it will be. But that is my concern with England in this tournament. The teams that I think ordinarily win the tournament, you talk about the flair players that national teams that win tournaments have, but ordinarily they have the best defences. And that's where I think England really are, I think, lighter than they are in those attacking options that you mentioned before.
Yeah, that was what I was going to ask. I mean, Harry Maguire, and also remember, Jordan Henderson and all the roles that he performs in midfield, still recovering from injury. How much of a concern is a lack of senior international experience in the middle of England's defensive third?
It is a concern, particularly when you come up against the top nations who've got experience, who'll wait, who'll have patience in games, who'll wait for those one moments. I do think that you've got a situation where England, they're going to have to be at full tilt, and that's not just the defenders. The goalkeeper's going to have a great tournament, and then the two that sit in front of that back four or five are going to also have to really play well. And I think that's the chance that England have, is if that back four or two, or that back three and that two in front, with the goalkeeper behind, can have the tournament of their lives, England do have a chance, because in forward areas, I think they've got unbelievable options and players who can change a game in a minute.
And fullbacks or wing-backs are such an important position in the modern game, the way that football's developed. So for you, who's on the left flank, who's on the right flank, Gary?
I'm going with Shaw and Walker if it's a back four. If it's a back five, then probably I'd go with Chilwell and James. I mean, in Euro 96, there are some comparisons in Euro 96, because in the first game I played against Switzerland, I played as a right-back, conventional right-back in a back four. In the second game against Scotland, in possession, I was a right wing-back. Against Spain in the quarter-final, I was a right wing-back in a back three, in a back five. So we changed systems. There are some comparisons with what happened in Euro 96, and Gareth has that, I think. I think if Maguire and Stones are fit, and I think Maguire, I can't see him playing today, it would be rush-back if he did. I think if Maguire and Stones are fit, I think you can play with a back four, but then Walker has to play as a right sort of centre-back in it, as a right back really, and then let one of the left backs go forward. And I think that if Maguire's not fit, I think England do have to consider going with a back three against the best teams, because I just don't think they're strong enough. And we did that in Euro 96. We moved between a back three and a back four regularly during games. It's something that players are comfortable with, and this team certainly is comfortable with.
What about Croatia? We've got to mention them because, of course, they got the better of England in the 2018 World Cup semi-final in Russia. And they've also got some players who've come off the back of some very impressive seasons. The likes of Ivan Perisic with Inter Milan, the likes of Mateo Kovacic with Chelsea, Simi Vašáľko with Atletico winning La Liga. So I know that they're not in form, but is this a Croatia team that actually come a little undercooked and could cause a problem here?
They will cause a problem. I mean, let's be clear, they're so experienced and they know what happened at the last World Cup. They're going to think this is the perfect game today in some ways, going to Wembley. And all the pressure, from the English fans is going to be on, obviously, the home team. And I think Croatia have got enough in them just to make it difficult. But I think we've got a coach, Gareth Southgate, who isn't going to try and win the tournament in the first game. He knows that where England have had problems in tournaments is where they've lost the first game. England drawing the first game of the tournament feels like a disappointment off the back of it, and there'll be some rumblings in the media and with fans, but it isn't the end of the world, honestly. I think making sure you pick up points in that first game is critical. Not losing is something that's really important.
Yes, of course, 66 draw against Uruguay in their opening game, 96 draw against Switzerland in the opening game. This time around, opening game against Croatia. Gary, how's it going to go? Give us your prediction.
I think it will be a draw. I just feel that both teams will be so well prepared for it in terms of knowing each other. The conditions will be difficult and make it difficult to be a real sort of high energy game. I do think that England, obviously, you said about Croatia not being in good form and being a little bit undercooked. England haven't had a chance to play together themselves. So I can't see both teams being at their absolute best today. I don't think either coach will expect that. So I think if you said to both managers at the end of the game it's a draw, whilst there may be some disappointment publicly, I think they'd probably shake hands and walk away and say, OK, let's fight our battles down the road. They certainly won't want to lose this match.